you do a great job on the really serious stories, and you do a great job also on the stories that are that came from bullshit and have serious undercurrents to them. I mean, tell the folks, I've teased them with some of them, but what are the rest of the topics? Do you want to reveal everything?
Yeah, no, we've announced all the episodes. So we can say a few things about each of them if you'd like. Jason, you want to just go for it? Start with one.
Well, what do we got first? We got the New Jack episode.
Oh yeah.
And I've seen that one. I've seen that one, and oh my God, I found out things about New Jack I didn't know.
What did you think about the New Jack episode? Let's ask Jim what he thought of it, because he hasn't told me really. I guess he said you liked it. But.
You know, once again, it tells the story as best you can in an hour. I mean, of a complex individual, but you definitely hit all the high spots, as they say. And I said at one point, I feel like, Dr. Loomis, Donald Pleasant's character in Halloween. I'm the one who kind of let him loose on the world. And my God, I didn't even know about a couple of the assault arrests from things that happened in the ring. They flew under the radar, but it also it tells you this was a guy who was unique and who probably could only rise to prominence in a crazy world like professional wrestling. But he's not just a fucking lunatic. He's a lunatic. He has a reason for being a lunatic. You go into his childhood and things that, happened to him that probably shaped some of his outlook on things. And you see his progression thanks to the B-roll and the stuff that you're able to use, his progression from a young guy in his 20s getting into wrestling and having an incredible promo and just being, willing to be that guy. And 20 years later, there's scars and there's injuries, and he is no longer has to be that guy. He has become that guy. And it's heavy. D'Lo Brown is in the episode, and he knows this better than anybody. He was there at the start and in ECW and a variety of places. And it's New Jack. What did you go through just to get New Jack to sit down?
Actually, it was very easy. It was a phone call that I can't remember who gave me his number. Someone gave me his number, and I called him, and I was like, "Hi, Mr. New Jack." No, and I was like, "Yeah, we do this TV show, and we want to do an episode about you." And he's like, "Yeah." I was like, "So is that okay?" And he's like, "Yeah." I was like, "Okay, so then I'll call you back with a date." Yeah, and that was it. It was 3 yeahs. And then we went to, we came all the way out to where he lives, and then, it was just like hoping that those 3 yeahs would equal him showing up. And it did. And we actually shot, his interview on in an old movie theater, right in front of these, you can kind of see all these balconies of cedar seats, because we thought that would be kind of appropriate. And I don't think he really knew or understood that, this was a TV program, and not a shoot interview or something. But he was, as I'm sure any wrestling fan who's seen a New Jack interview, he was on, and he was very on and very good. And, it was one of the more memorable interviews we did, right, Jason?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Usually our schedule is so crazy that it's really hard to find time to just spend time with our subjects and just earn their trust and just get to know them before we talk. And, we try our best to do that. But with New Jack, it was literally, he just walked in, and there was no small talk, and it was just roll the camera and let's go.
Zero small talk. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Jack and I, everybody knows, have had our checkered past, and then we made up years ago. But that's when I first saw him, and I say this in the episode, and paraphrasing. To me, wrestling has always been about, can you make me believe that you are the person you are purported to be? And he had that from the start. and his work was questionable at the start, and nobody's ever worked like New Jack, even when he got experience. It's always been unique, but it didn't matter. He gave off the aura, both verbally and physically in the ring, and poor Riggy Morton, had to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune with New Jack and Mustafa as green as grass, beating the shit out of him night after night. But Jack always was a personality that you could believe in him because he believed in him. And one of the morals of the episode may be that he believed in him so much that he became him. And I've always said there's never should be any discernible difference between a guy's gimmick and a guy in real life. Just turn the volume up. I bet New Jack had to turn it down.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah. And I would just also say, like, our show deals with so many, common themes across the other episodes of, like, here's, what happens when, reality and the fiction aspects of wrestling when those collide, and what happens. And like New Jack looks at some pretty harsh consequences in terms of, like, where do you draw the line between, okay, we're wrestling, we're working, and now it's crossing the line into something more nefarious.
Felonious assault, I believe, was the phrase that I used. We're crossing the line between working and felonious assault.
Yeah, it was funny. And, but also it's just, and that was kind of what we wanted to look at. And, but one of the eye-opening things for me in that episode was I had never really seen much of New Jack and Smoky Mountain before doing this. And it was just like, wow, like what a cutting edge character for that time, in terms of, like, such a reflection of, like, what's going on in the world at the time, playing off the fears of the audience, and it just being this kind of, like, there is some genius in that, and that was what was really interesting for me. I don't know, and putting the story together. I don't know, Jason, but for you.
No, absolutely.
Sure.
It's like when you see that footage, that Smoky Mountain footage, there's an energy to it that I haven't really quite seen in any other, like, wrestling footage. Like the heat that he gets, like when people are, like, throwing the Confederate flag, like, in his face and screaming at him, and but that at the same time, like Dino Brown talks about it in a very complicated way, is that, like, he's looking to try and get this reaction from a crowd, or even if they're, like, hurling racial slurs at him, that's kind of what he's looking for in a way, which it's very complicated, but you got to hear it from D'Lo himself in our show. But it's just, like, such an interesting way to take entertainment in,
Well, that's the one time I tried to be newsworthy. Everybody always says I'm stuck in the past, so I've tried to book up-to-date angles, and then I've forever been branded as a monster for how dare you, the gangsters. But it was a guy that was brand new, that had never been seen on television before, that had never been seen by the mainstream, widespread wrestling audience before. But he comes in as a promo, not only fully formed, but exceptional, and with a look that backs up the way that he works, because he didn't really do anything that he couldn't do. He just fought. He was not a wrestler. He fought, and it came off, and it was probably, I would say, 5 to 7 years before its time.
I agree. Yeah, totally.
But what some of the other episodes, what have been your guys' favorite moments or stuff we need to look out for? Because there's a whole slew of them in between.
Okay, what do we got? Well, we got we finished 2 episodes that we started work on last season, which I'm very thankful that are going to be finally coming out. So that's the Brawl for All, featuring yourself,
and many others, and not just me. I know I'm the draw, guys. I know I'm the main event.
It's just you. No, we cut everybody else out. It's just you, and it's great. No,
I want one other motherfucker on that specifically. I haven't seen this one yet either, but I want to hear what he has to say for himself.
I can't wait. I can't wait for you to see it. I'm very excited for you to see it. But basically, yeah, like Brawl for All, was an episode that it's funny because since announcing the lineup of this season, I'm getting a lot of messages, a lot of people messaging me and saying, why the Brawl for All? Or how'd you get an hour out of the Brawl for All? or whatever. Or how is the Brawl for All dark? And I'm thinking, guys, the Brawl for All is really dark, like it is, because, you have these guys, like I was going back and saying, just like the risks people take for this industry, right? And especially in an instance like the Brawl for All, where, you're trying to get ahead. Like a lot of these wrestlers that went into it were looking for a chance to improve their spot in the card, and when you see guys taking that risk and throwing themselves into a situation in which they're not suited for, or is beyond their element, and the consequences of that, like for the sake of, I guess at the time, which was like, Attitude Era entertainment, it is kind of like from a macro view, you kind of look at it in that way, and it is disturbing. It's disturbing to watch, if you go back and look at it. I remember when when we were all at your house and we watched it together, so, yeah. And I think, for that, it definitely,
it was disturbing to watch it was disturbing to watch for the fans and the professionals, but it was darker for the professionals than it was for the fans. And that's where the darkness comes in, is so many of those guys, it spread ill will, it spread injury, it harmed careers. It basically, it was one of those rare lose scenarios where nobody prospered.
Yeah, it's like the wrestling version of the Running Man, kind of.
Arnold made out okay in that.
Yeah, I guess so.
And then also,
well, yeah, and then you look at, one more thing about it. Why it's also a fascinating story. You look at a guy like Bart Gunn who wins it. He wins it, and he's thinking like, okay, like here's my time. Like I just knocked out the whole roster, and now here's my time. To really be celebrated. And then it's like, nope, you're just going to get decapitated by this guy that's just going to come in and just punch your face off. And then it's like the most like deflating, cinematic, kind of, but like tragic ending to this like crazy calamity story,
Well, that's true, because in the lose scenario, let's not leave well enough alone. And let's destroy anything that we've built from a guy that's never coming back to our company, Butterball, or Butterbean, Butterball. Oh my God! Another show that was left over from last season, and boy, it's amazing how you get more episodes when you're just the highest rated television program in the history of a network. But another one was about Dino Bravo, and a lot of the modern fans may not even be familiar with this story at all, but this is an actual wrestling-related gangland slaying.
Yeah. I mean, the Dino Bravo story was, it's fascinating because it's, for those who don't know, Dino Bravo was, I'm sure most of your listeners know who Dino Bravo is, but, being a huge star, in Montreal in the late 70s, early 80s. And then he kind of, when he got poached by the WWF, he kind of just didn't really make much of an impact in the States, in terms of, he was getting towards the end of his career. And then when he moved on from wrestling, he didn't really have a way to supplement his income. And he had no plan for his post-wrestling life. And he basically got involved in, illicit, illegal, activities in organized crime. And then he was, he was killed in his living room, and, when his family was away, and it was just, it came into this huge story locally in Quebec, and no answers, no closure, no answers, no real evidence even to what happened. Only some kind of rumors and hearsay and some corroborated stories in terms of what he was involved in, but no conclusive end to who's responsible. And interestingly enough, the case happened, almost 30 years ago now, 27 years ago. It's still open. It's a still open case. So it's, for us, it's like, we couldn't get any any cooperation with the local authorities because of that fact. And so we basically were relying on most of, the people that knew him close and intimately, his family, his daughter, his wife, and some of the other wrestlers who, came up with him in Montreal, and just trying to piece together, where things went south, and also what was going on in Montreal at the time, because organized crime was a hotbed of organized crime at that time as well.
I think it's safe to say that nobody came in 6 years after he retired and killed him because they were hot at him for a fuck finish. It had to be what he was currently involved in at the time. And then another episode.
It was only a year later. It's only like a year. And
that's right. Because he didn't retire until about a year or so
92.
before that. Yeah. Well, so maybe the heat could have still been fresh. But another of the episodes is on the Road Warriors, and I've seen some of the reenactment footage, which you guys have been dying to do.
Oh yeah, we posted some stuff. Yeah.
And this is another example of, and obviously Animal is still with us, but Hawk's story was kind of tragic in its own right. And after having spent so much time with those guys, they were over so strong for such a short period of time. Then, unfortunately, with the changes in WCW where they fit like a glove, they went to the WWF. I don't think were ever presented to their full ability. They were never the dominant force that they were for those first 5 years as the Road Warriors or whatever. And then after that, they were so strong. The legacy is still there. But, Hawk's story, obviously, I haven't seen a screener on this one either, but Hawk's story, makes that thing go around after their, active days as a team were over with. And that had to be fun doing the reenactment, but, getting into, Hawk's issues and vices and et cetera. And what a great guy he was. But, that was another one I'm going to be looking forward to.
Doing the interviews for the Road Warrior episode, speaking with people who were really close to Hawk, we never quite seen such a reaction in a way that, like, so many of our subjects were very emotional talking about Hawk. Like, all the guys we talked about started crying when he was, like, brought up. Even something that, like, his brother said that was really powerful was that he never saw his brother as Hawk. He only saw him as Mike. And when you hear, like, how he, like, touched so many people, it's pretty amazing, because we've only really seen just the character of Hawk, where he's just super energetic and, like, crazy over the top, and to hear from people about, like, just how, like, kind he was and affectionate he was to his friends. That was a side we never, I wasn't really quite expecting to see.
Yeah, it's really like a story of like, brotherhood, and, like, your brothers on the road, and then what, especially for Animal, for Joe, like, the experience of a fallen brother, and that whole thing, and obviously gets into, Hawk's demons and those types of things, but it also just explores so much of that, like, relationship and that companionship that you have. And especially with all these guys coming from the same place, and, or most of them coming kind of from the same area. And I have to throw this in, is like, it's also kind of a hometown episode for me, because I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota. And a lot of the places these guys, went around and bounced at and, bartended at and worked out at are places I definitely, seen growing up. And so for me, it was kind of this, like, going back to Minnesota. And we actually decided to shoot the entire episode in Minnesota. The whole thing is shot in Minnesota. It's the only episode we've ever done where it's in one place, because we brought everybody to Minnesota to kind of, like, and then, to kind of just reconnect and, talking to, like, obviously Joe's in it. You have Nikita's in it. Scott Norton's in it. Paul Ellering's obviously in it. And Hawk's brothers are in it. And then also, like, Eddie Sharkey's in it, which is awesome to be able to talk to him.
Cool.
Is he still blind as a bat without his glasses, Eddie Sharkey?
I would assume, but he's a cool dude. I mean, he I mean, I couldn't believe this. We were in his apartment, and I don't know, like the subject of like Ribera jackets came up, and I was like, oh, like talking about how like someday I hope to go to Tokyo and check it out, be the ultimate wrestling fan. And he's like, oh, I think I got one of those jackets over here. And then he gave me his Ribera jacket.
Oh my
Just
God.
like out of nowhere. Just like, here you go. And I'm like, are you sure? Are you sure? Like, I can't accept this. And he's like, no, I want you to have it. And he just like gave me this like amazing 1980s, I'm guessing, like Ribera jacket, which I treasure now and will keep safe for the rest of my life. But the one thing I wanted to say, and Jason, you should talk about this, is the Road Warriors. This is also a huge this is like us, like, Road Warriors are a big deal to us, in terms of like kids growing up and like how cool they were, and so for us, it's like the opportunity to kind of live out that fantasy a little bit, so you should talk about that, right? I mean,
oh no, big time. Like I think ever since we like came up with the concept of Dark Side of the Ring, we always thought like in our trailer, there would be like an image of a backlit hawk and animal with their spikes on, and it's just, you just see the streams of light going through it. So we fantasize about that, like, ever since we came up with the concept. And so, yeah, in a lot of ways for us growing up, they were like real life action figures. It's kind of crazy to say, but just their design and the aesthetic of them were just the most amazing looking like action figures. And then now, like, to really like, it's like in some way it's almost kind of like getting to know the person behind my favorite action figure. And and like Joe, like Animal's like identity is kind of is largely like, the Road Warriors are a part of his like identity. And with Hawk being gone and you're losing your companion with that, it's like, how do you
maintain
still
that,
move on? Yeah, like how do you move on with that identity? And like it's that's like that was the real heart of it all, I think.
Well, I was also just going to throw on top of that too, just like backing up to us being fans of the Road Warriors. I really challenge anybody like to show me something cooler than the Road Warriors at their peak entering a goddamn arena with Black Sabbath playing. There's nothing cooler than that. There's nothing
I can tell you
tougher and cooler than that.
I can tell you from firsthand recollection, not only was the pop was, as Mick Foley said one time, was Hegstrandish in its intensity and Laurinaitis-like in its volume.
Wow.
But
amazing.
Also, he's incredible. But just the sight, we would get goosebumps. And the Midnight Express had to work with the Road Warriors in not only their real hometown of Minneapolis, Minnesota, but their gimmick hometown of Chicago, Illinois. Yeah. And it wasn't like they were pricks. I've said many times how the Warriors always sold for the midnight. They knew we were going to do everything we could to make them look like $1 million and get the gimmick over. And they didn't mind selling for the racket because they knew it was loaded, all that stuff. They were great to work with in that aspect. But in the early years when they were still very excited and you would hear that rush, they would come to the ring, and Dennis, especially because Dennis was the first, a member of the first combination of the Midnight that had to face him. Dennis would look at us and say, we're about to get our fucking asses kicked. Because we believed it, because they believed it, and they did it in a working way. But my God, it was an atmosphere that you can't find anymore because it was superheroes coming into the building.
No, that's just, I don't think that'll be ever, that feeling of like that will be replicated, just of like, especially when you look at it in Japan too, just like how close the audience is to the action. And like when those guys hit, and they come out in the C's part, kind of like Brody. But when you just mix that, well, with Brody was the Immigrant Song, which is so cool, and then with, obviously the Road Warriors is Black Sabbath. It's just the best mixture of like, just this intense, insane visual out of a movie, out of something out of like, it's just way comic book, like way farther out. So we also just wanted this episode. Yes, it deals with like tragic themes that our show explores, but it's also just like a love letter and like a puff piece on like the Road Warriors because they're so cool, Yeah.
Well, hey,
Yeah.
I know one love letter you're sending that Brian Last is going to enjoy, because there is an entire episode for the first time that I know of, again, ever in mainstream television, on the lifetimes and bizarre end of Herb Abrams,
Oh
the
my
most
God.
infamous wrestling promoter of modern times, maybe second only to Jack Pfeffer in Wild Stories Being Told. How did you run down the people that knew what the fuck was up with Herb Abrams?
I got to tell you the origin story on Herb Abrams, because it's definitely funny. So you know Sean Oliver, obviously,
Yes.
right? So
Oh, yes.
Sean Oliver does kayfabe commentaries. Basically, what happened is when we first started thinking about Dark Side of the Ring as an idea, a concept, whatever, and trying to put together stories that would fit with the show. I actually asked him because, like I said, Jason and I were really into shoot interviews, and we wanted to make Dark Side of the Ring basically just glorified cinematic shoot interviews. We asked Sean, like, what do you think? What are some of the craziest wrestling stories that are out there? And the key, like the keystone, like he made it so clear. It's like, you have to look into the Herb Abrams story. This is what you need to look into. This is Vice. This is everything. Like, look into this story. And like, it kind of went in one ear and out the other a little bit, I'll admit. And I put it down on paper. It was actually part of the original pitch materials that we used to pitch the show. It was in there originally. And for whatever reason, it just didn't stick for season 1. And then a few months ago, I talked to Sean. He interviewed me on his podcast. And he basically grilled me and was like, why didn't you do this story? I told you specifically to do this story. The world doesn't need a Montreal Screwjob documentary. They need the Herb Abrams documentary, and it was like, okay, I'm sorry. And I actually turned around, went to the office the next day, and I told the staff, guys, it's Herb Abrams time. And then we have one of our colleagues here. He's a story producer here, and his name is Howard. And he basically took the story and ran with it, and in an amazing way. Like, he's like almost now become Herb Abrams in some ways. But
hopefully he won't go out the same way.
No. Well, he might like that. But he basically tracked down all of the people that were part of the formation of UWF, family members, and piecing together the story. Because the only thing that I knew going into this story, I guess we should fill people in who might not know what this is about. But, Herb Abrams was basically a wrestling fan with a dream. And his dream was to start his own wrestling promotion called the UWF. And that he would run himself, he'd be the centerpiece of, and he would basically get ex-WWF talent at the time, and this is late 80s, early 90s, and go head-to-head with Vince. I mean, that was what his dream was, so... and then,
wait a minute, you said this was the late 80s. I thought you were talking about this was this year, but go ahead.
Oh, no, it was. No, and so then he... exactly, that's pretty funny. And then... And then it failed spectacularly, and then he met his end, of course. And it's this incredible story, untold story, I think, in any sort of way. And the information that Howard was able to get and uncover, and everything that we were able to get from the people who lived through it, including Mick Foley, who really cut his teeth there. It's going to be definitely an episode you're not going to want to. You can't miss this one.
I don't want any spoilers, but just answer the one question. How many naked hookers were in Herb Abrams' office when he had the heart attack while on cocaine and covered in Vaseline?
Well, I don't know the answer to that question, unfortunately, but I can say that it is that moment in time is like, it's like the JFK assassination of wrestling. Like we can't find out like what has happened definitively in that moment. We have talked to so many different people, and there's literally like 12 different takes on what had transpired that night in that office, and we kind of Rashomon style kind of show you all of them.
We need
Yeah.
the Zapruder film is what we need.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah.
And a couple more episodes real quick. You're doing Dr. D, David Schultz, and the episode with John Stossel on 2020 and the surrounding furor and uproar, which once again, a lot of people know, but this is coming straight from all the horses' mouths. And also another story that I just can't wait to see what you do with this, because you've done such an incredible job with everything else. But another story people think they know, Superfly Jimmy Snuka.
Yep. Those are, two interesting stories. I mean, we can start with Dr. D. I mean, Jason, that was one of the more, memorable experiences for us, definitely on the road.
Yeah. Meeting Dr. D was amazing. It was so cool to spend time with somebody who is from that era, like a guy who was good friends with Bruiser Brody, and spent time with him on the road, and just to get somebody I don't know, it just meeting him was one of the best experiences for me, at least, because I don't know, he was just really considerate in a lot of ways. Like I was saying before, you don't have a lot of time to spend with people, and we at least had 2 days with David. But right off the bat, he just wanted to know things about us, which actually was kind of interesting. Usually when we land on a scene, it's just we're just talking about wrestling with most people for the most part. But with David, it was I don't know, he wanted to get to know us in in a different way. Probably he wanted to see if he could trust us. And we spent time with him out in Tennessee, where he has these storage lockers that were just filled with incredible wrestling memorabilia and photographs from his past. And it was a real trip just to spend a couple days with him. And he was he again, him being so considerate, we all, the crew at that point when we got there, we were, I think, so malnourished and sore from camera operating, that him and his wife, they made us lunch. They went out and they picked fruit and vegetables from their yard to give us. And David literally massaged me, stretched me out.
He reset you.
Yeah, he did. He reset me. Yeah. I got treatment from the doctor.
Well, David is one of those guys. His personality is so intimidating. And his demeanor is so intimidating, but he's one of those guys, if he's on your side, if he likes you, you couldn't count on a better guy. If he doesn't like you, you probably should stay away from him.
Yeah. Well, I think he may have taken to us, I'm from Nova Scotia, Halifax, Nova Scotia, and he spent.
We won't hold that against you. We will not blame you for that.
But he spent a lot of time in Nova Scotia wrestling in Atlantic Grand Prix with the likes of Killer Carl Krause, and I don't know, he as soon as he heard that we were I was from there. I don't know.
Yeah,
it took an edge off.
Did he tell you the story of the night that he saved Phil Hickerson and Dennis Condrey's life when the cops and the people turned on him, and he brought the hockey stick like a helicopter blade to the ring and back out of there?
Oh yeah,
it was like, in Texas they say one riot, one ranger. In with Schultz around, it's one riot, one doctor.
That's amazing. No, and I have to also just quickly say about Dr. D is that the experience of filming with him was very it was not the same emotionally, but it kind of felt like being in Kevin Von Erich's compound, being in the Von Erich compound, in Hawaii, which is this beautiful, amazing, place, serene, and then Dr. D's is in literally the middle of nowhere, rural Tennessee, where no cell phones work. We had to get snake bite kits. This is where we were, and it was literally going into this compound that he built with his own hands. And it's just amazing to see someone at his age who is literally working 14 hours in the sun and at night, over the course of the night, and he's nocturnal, and he's It's amazing.
Do you think the coronavirus is even has the news even reached David yet? He's self-sufficient. He don't have to leave there for years, right?
Oh, I bet it's not a worry. Out of the coronavirus. Yeah. No, I don't think it's a worry for him. He actually messaged me just a few minutes ago saying he was on his way to Nashville to help people. That's what he just texted me.
Well, there you go.
So, David's, that's David, for sure. That episode is really interesting too, because, wrestling fans will get to hear from John Stossel, for the first time. And, that'll be interesting. And that was a very fun interview, I have to say, as one of my more favorites, just because I was so curious on how the interviews between David and John Stossel would intercut, and it's very entertaining. I will put that for you.
John, you ignorant slut.
Yeah.
We talked in advance of you guys shooting a lot of stuff for the Snuka episode, and one problem you had there was it's incredible when you go back and look at the amount of people who were in the locker room at that time, in the WWF at that time, around the incident that aren't here anymore. It was down to a precious few already.
Yeah, it was really tough for us to find and to speak to wrestlers who, but we wound up doing it, but who were there that night during those events.
You got pretty much everybody that's left to get.
Probably. But that story is it's an episode as we speak right now that we're still working on. I mean, we're still working on the show, folks.
Yeah. I'm cutting that episode right now.
Yeah, he's in the, I know. So we're still rushing to finish it for air. But I mean, it is one of the more complex, dizzying stories out of all of the ones that we're tackling this season, because, so much of it was unresolved at the time in which it took place. And then of course you're looking at how when the story, came back into, when it came back into the headlines in 2013 or whenever it was, or 2015, and having to sort through, all this new information and going back in time and seeing how this has lingered on and how we're kind of dependent on a lot of people's memories 30 plus years later. It is a very complicated story to tell, in terms of, what really happened, and maybe we'll never know. It might be one of those situations where it's just, now that Snook has passed on and, the story has kind of faded away, it's really, maybe we'll never know, but, there are a lot of interesting facets of the story that are left to be examined,
Well, guys, is there anything else that we haven't covered that you want to let people know to look for, or just look for everything on the second season of Dark Side of the Ring?
Yeah, I mean, we start March 24th, as you said before, with the 2-hour premiere on the Chris Benoit episode. It starts at 9 p.m. and then every Tuesday from then on, the show will be running at 10 p.m. on Tuesdays. You can find us on, social media at Dark Side of the Ring on Instagram or Dark Side of Ring on Twitter, and, ask us any questions, send us stuff. Especially, we're not really up on too many conspiracy theories, but obviously if there's some of the stories we're covering this season, if there's any tips or leads on anything that we missed or we didn't get, definitely send us stuff, and we'd love to chat about them with you. And I'm sure we're going to be, doing some things on Twitter and on Instagram to kind of, address that stuff and talk to you guys about that stuff. But yeah, definitely want to hear feedback about anything. And I don't know, Jason, anything else that you want to?
No, I think you covered it all. Like we're still here working on the shows. We still have like another month of editing we've got to do here.
Quarantined in the edit room.
We are. We literally are. I just hope this all goes smoothly and we get all these episodes out to everyone.
Yeah, we're
trying. Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you, I said it last year that I thought it was not one of the best wrestling shows or series I've seen, but one of the best series about wrestling because, this isn't no low budget, half-ass production. And I think this season, from what I've seen, you guys have exceeded last year's expectations. If you're a wrestling fan and you're not watching this, I don't know what's the matter with you. And if you don't like wrestling and you just come here to hear me rant about politics and me and Brian argue about pizza, you still want to see this show because you humanize everything and you make it so the stories are about wrestling, but they're not exclusive to wrestling. They're human stories and they touch humans. And I think you've done a great job. I know I'm raving. I'm blowing you right here in public, but when I like something, I spread it around. And it's not just because I'm in some of them. Because I've actually liked the ones that I wasn't in more than the ones that I was in because I learned more about that stuff. But I want to thank you guys for being here. And when this is the biggest hit ever, exceeding last year, like you said, we want to encourage everybody to come up with ideas for season 3, but we may have to have you back on. Just remember us. Remember the little guys when you're out there at the Academy Awards next year. Anyway.
Well, Jim, we got to thank you too. We got to thank you too. Like whenever we come to your place, you and your family, Stacy and Harley Quinn, have always been so gracious to us, and you've treated us so well, and you've been so inspiring to us as well too, and given us guidance and helped us along the way.
Yeah.
We can't thank you enough.
Yeah, you missed the tacos last time.
Jason, you couldn't come last time. They just come for the barbecue, ladies and gentlemen. And we actually
it's a big part of it.
They have great tacos at the barbecue place, Martin's Barbecue here in Louisville, and the smoked wing, everybody, and the hush puppies with comeback sauce.
The best.
There you go. Yeah. Anyway, all righty.